Hello and welcome to Tech Deals. Which graphics card and CPU combinations make sense and which should be left on the cutting room floor? I don't know if that's the right intro for this video, but I'm going to go with it. Today we've got a comparison between two different builds using different CPUs and different GPUs. Now before you all run to the comments and scream, "That's not how you benchmark," well, just give me a second and let me explain. Today, we're going to be featuring two of these four CPUs. If this video develops interest, if you guys want to see more, I can repeat this comparison using the Ryzen CPUs that you see here. The i7-9700KF is currently about a $350 8-core 8-thread processor, and the i9-9900K is an 8-core 16-thread, almost $500 processor. So you're looking at about $150 difference between these two CPUs. They're both 8 cores, they're both very nice. The i9 has hyperthreading and the i7 does not. Yes, I'm aware new CPUs are coming. That's for a topic for a future video. For now, this is what's available on the market. Paired with these, we have a couple of graphics card options, and this is where I've run into a challenge in benchmarking in the past. If you're comparing graphics cards, do you always put them on the very best CPU possible? Well, one school says yes, absolutely. Remove the CPU as much as possible from the performance equation. Give it the i9-9900K overclocked to 5 gigahertz. Take as much of the CPU influence out of the equation and then compare all of your graphics cards on that CPU. I've done that. Watch my 16 graphics card comparison that I did a few months ago, which were all done on the i9-9900K. Here's the problem with that. I tested an RX 580 $100 graphics card on a $500 CPU. That's absurd. No one in their right mind is installing RX 580s on a $500 anything. That just doesn't make any sense. Even the $200 and $300 graphics cards make no sense. Who is putting even an RX 5700 or an RTX 2060 or 2060 Super on a $500 i9? I hope you're not, and if you are, you're doing it wrong. So, as a general rule, you want to spend more on your graphics card, we're talking about gaming here, more on your graphics card than you spend on your CPU. My general rule of thumb is 2 times. So if you spend $500 on your CPU, spend $1,000 on your graphics card. If you spend $300 on your CPU, spend $600 on your graphics card. That's a rule of thumb. It's not, hardcore. You have to do it that way, but it's a ballpark idea. Buy a $200 CPU, buy a $400 GPU, and so on and so forth. Now, certainly it depends upon what games you're playing, what else you're using your computer for. It depends upon whether or not you're buying a little bit for the future, or if the cards are coming near the end of their life and you're waiting for the 30 series and maybe you buy down a little bit planning on upgrading because RTX 30 series is coming. I understand that. Would I really recommend, spoiler alert, anybody buy an RTX 2080 Ti now in March of 2020? No. The prices haven't come down. RTX 30 series is coming. If you were going to buy a 2080 Ti, you should have done it a year ago. Then, because the prices were the same and you'd have had a year of enjoyment out of it, a year of use to amortize the cost of it versus buying it at end of life. So really this video would have made sense a year ago as opposed to today, but what can I say? My views and thoughts on benchmarking have evolved over time. I recently did a video that was 1% and 0.1% low, useful or useless. And this is a continuation of that thought process, which is how we benchmark and what we test. It's putting, for example, if we test CPUs, we do the same thing in reverse. We could test an entire line from $85 all the way to $1,000 CPUs. And what do? We put $1,200 RTX 2080 Ti's on them, which makes sense for the expensive CPUs, but raise your hand if you're putting RTX 2080 Ti's on a Ryzen 5 1600 for $85. I hope nobody has raised their hand, because if you have, well, okay, fair enough, you can, but that's just silly. In any case, so my thought process here is, let's test how people will actually build computers, and along the way, I can talk about how to build balanced systems. A rising tide lifts all boats, so to speak. So if you use a better graphics card or a better CPU, you want a nicer motherboard. You want a nicer motherboard, you need more RAM or a nicer case or a nicer power supply. I am very much opposed to the idea of buying a premium part or two and putting the rest into the cheapest junk you can find. One of the comments that I got, this is the December 2019 sponsored build here, which originally had the i7-9700KF in it, and several people said, wait a minute, that's a $2,000 build? And this originally had this RTX 2070 Super? That's absurd. For $2,000, you can get an i9-9900K and a 2080 Ti. Well, you sort of can. It's a tight fit. But yes, you technically can. You can find from time to time 2080 Ti's for $1,000 even. It's hard, and they're the bare bones base cards. They're not the nice premium factory overclocked with superior cooler cards like this Oris right here. But you can. And you can certainly find an i9-9900K or KF if you don't care about integrated graphics for under $500 from time to time. You can get an El Cheapo $50 case. You can get an El Cheapo power supply. You can get an El Cheapo motherboard, El Cheapo cooler, El Cheapo storage, El Cheapo RAM. And you can, in fact, build yourself a $2,000 i9-9900K with an RTX 2080 Ti. And you can pat yourself on the back and say, see, what a complete pile of junk I built. I mean it. If you're building that level of hardware, buy a nice case, buy a nice motherboard, build a nice computing experience. It's like putting a very expensive LS crate motor into a 15-year-old piece of crap car with bad shocks and bad brakes and a bad suspension. You can, but it's a waste of money. If you're going to put a fancy engine in a rebuilt car, it should be completely rebuilt. It doesn't make sense not to do the whole thing. I'm not a car tuner expert, but I at least know enough that you don't put those fancy crate motors into old jalopy cars. Go with me on the analogy here. It's a car analogy. So my thought process is let's split them up and let's try to build more logical, rational systems that are a joy to use for years and years to come. Excellent cooling, great storage, great RAM. Now, of course, obviously, you could go with less storage than I put in here and a few other things, but move the parts around as you like. It's a balanced build in terms of a premium experience. If I wouldn't have built it that way, because obviously an 8-core 8-thread chip doesn't make sense. But we're not going to talk about that in this video because that's water under the bridge. I will mention it when I show you the benchmarks. Yes, there's benchmarks, don't worry. At this point, I wouldn't buy any of the Intel chips because the 10th generation is coming too soon. I am filming this at the beginning of March 2020. If you're watching this now, they're not out yet, and yes, these are the best Intel has to offer. But within the next 2-ish months or so, the 10 series are coming. I'll cover those when they come out. They're going to 10 cores and 20 threads. The i7 is going to 8 cores, 16 threads. Hyper-threading is coming down the whole line. If you haven't already bought these, don't bother. They've been out for 18 months at this point. If you bought one 18 months ago, don't fret too much. It's okay, you're fine, but don't buy them now. Ryzen's here, and if you have to buy today, if you have to build today, if you don't want to wait for the next series of chips, then I highly recommend Ryzen 7 3700X or Ryzen 9 3900X, which we'll cover in a future video if you guys like this one. As far as the graphics cards go, $500 for a 2070 Super. This is about a $1,200 card right here. You can sometimes find the 2080 Ti's around $1,100 for a decent card. So let me put it this way. This is an $800 combination versus a $1,600 combination. And I might very well put that in the thumbnail or the title, because if you take, well, roughly $350-ish for the CPU, plus a cooler, we've got a Dark Rock Pro 4 and an Noctua NHD 15 here, you're looking about $90 for a decent tower cooler, versus $500 for the i9-9900K, and then you add in either $500 or $1,100-ish for the graphics card, you are roughly, I am rounding, $800 versus $1,600. Twice as much money, and for that twice as much money, you get hyper-threading and a little bit faster graphics card and 11 gigs of VRAM versus 8. Is it a deal? No, of course not. buying the best is never a deal. Buying the most tricked out, most loaded car you can get, the Black Label Lincoln edition or whatever it is that you buy, those are never the deal. Going into the BMW dealer and checking every box on the option to buy the premium car is never a deal in terms of price to performance. They're faster, they're better, they're nicer, they're more, but of course you're gonna pay a premium. And I guess, to be honest, this is one of those things that always baffles me when people say, but the 2080 Ti costs more and it's not like double the performance. It's the best in the world. You're paying a premium for it. If you want the best, it costs more. You should buy mid-range parts if value for the money is your concern. I wouldn't even buy a 2070 Super at this point. A 2060 for $299 is really the sweet spot, or an RX 5700 if you prefer a Navi. And I know some of you are going to sit here, watch this video, and go, but the RX 5700 XT is a better value. Yeah, Navi drivers suck. I don't recommend Navi cards. If you have a Navi card and the drivers work well for you, rock on, man. I'm glad it works well for you. That is great. I've had too many problems. I've talked to too many other tech YouTubers who have had problems with the drivers. Little inconsistencies, problems, errors, issues. They're not deal breakers. They're not preventing people from using the cards, but they're annoyances. And they crop up just often enough to make you go, ugh, yeah, that. And then you put one of these in and everything works all the time. So, NVIDIA. In any case, a 2060 for $299 or a 2060 Super for, if you can find one for under $400, would be where I'd be at this point. Or probably 6 months from now, the 30 series will be coming out. Those are a shrink to 7 nanometers, and those will be a really, really nice performance boost. In any case, I could sit here and talk y'all's ear off for the rest of the day, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, we're going to go straight to the benchmarks, which are less than 10 minutes long. I kept them fairly short this time. We got charts, we got numbers, we got side-by-side comparison. I have some more thoughts, and then I'll be back after the benchmarks to share my conclusion with you and to share a few more thoughts with you because I always have those. Our first benchmark, as always, is Assassin's Creed Odyssey, this generation's Crisis. If it'll run ACO, it'll run anything. Well, kinda, sorta, there are exceptions, but this is a pretty demanding, harsh, unoptimized game. And as you can see here on the left, we have the i7-9700KF with the RTX 2070 Super and Dark Rock Pro 4 versus the i9-9900K RTX 2080 Ti and an NHD 15 from Noctua, clearly massively faster. Wait a minute, who stole the performance? We're getting like 80-something frames per second on the $800 solution and like 95 frames per second on the $1,600. This is twice as much money. It should be twice as fast, right? Well, no, that's not how it works because faster components exponentially cost more money. And while for sure 2080 Ti's are nice, they're not twice as fast as the 2070 Super for, frankly, more than twice the money. The CPU is a separate topic we'll talk about as we go through these benchmarks. 84 to 99, that's like 15% performance difference in the average for $800 more. We're at 1440p high detail, 1080p would be too low, 4K would just be a graphics card test and would, I think, be overkill. So I think 1440p high is right in the middle, and it fairly balances CPU versus GPU usage. Notice the 1% and 0.1% low are basically identical. Well, keep in mind this is a built-in benchmark and it's not long enough and there's not enough going on, and there's 1% lows on built-in benchmarks are probably going to usually be pretty close to each other for reasons I discussed in a previous video about 1%, 1% low benchmarking. But regardless, you are looking at about a 15% difference here. Moving right along to Far Cry New Dawn, the full price DLC to Far Cry 5, which of course I'm contractually obligated to say every time I run this benchmark. Yes, I know it wasn't $60, but who's counting? In any case, the performance here is again faster on the i9 with the 2080 Ti, but not monstrously so. I said I would comment on the CPU differences before. Let me bring those up here. If you take a look, you'll see that both of them are fine and well within acceptable limits of CPU usage, but the i9 is far lower in terms of CPU percentage. it has more threads, and so every thread, every core being used is a lower percentage. And you're seeing that reflected here because it's 8 cores, 16 threads versus 8 cores, 8 threads. Now, I don't want to rehash that argument because I've given it many, many times before. I hope at this point in 2020, none of you are going out to buy an i7-9700KF. Intel's new i7s with hyperthreading are coming in just a few months, so it's sort of water under the bridge at this point, but I just thought I'd point it out using this benchmark as an example. In terms of performance, we have almost exactly 20% performance difference. Yes, I did the math. 112 frames per second on the i7 with the 2070 Super versus 134 on the i9 with the 2080 Ti. Just a thought about the detail settings and resolution. If we were running at 4K or if we turned it up to Ultra, and of course, for future games, obviously a 2080 Ti is going to future-proof itself a bit more. But for more than double the money, you can buy a 2070 Super today, use it for 3 years, and then buy the next $500 card, which will be absolutely faster than a 2080 Ti. If you were going to buy a 2080 Ti, to be completely blunt, you should have done it back at launch. They haven't dropped in price, so it doesn't make any sense at this point in 2020. Moving along to Gears 5, we're going to see much of the same thing, but I have something else for you to consider. In terms of percentage difference of performance versus percentage difference of price, it does matter whether you're considering just the cost of the CPU and GPU or whether you're considering the entire system. A $2,000 build with the i7 and an RTX 2070 Super, and let's be blunt at this point, if you were going to buy the i7, it should really be a Ryzen 7 3700X. Please, if you're not going to spend the $500 on the i9, get a Ryzen. Ryzen makes much more sense if you're not going absolute top of the line. But if you're going to spend $2,000 on that, then it's $2,800 for the RTX 2080 Ti flavor, maybe with a Ryzen 9 3900X, which is also an extremely, maybe even a better choice at this point versus the i9 9900K. And if you're going that route, there's a 40% price increase, $2,000 to $2,800. And for that 40% price increase, you get a 31% performance increase in Gears 5. 96 to 126 is just over 31% increase in performance. Now, if you just look at the price of the graphics card and the CPU, you go, well, that's outrageous. I'm paying 100% more money and I'm only getting 31% more performance. Rip off. Okay, but if you're building an entire computer, it's a 40% difference from $2,000 to $2,800. Actually, that becomes quite reasonable, all things considered. Although you could also still go with a Ryzen 7 3700X and get a 2080 Ti, and it wouldn't be more, and actually it would be spot on the money. But putting that issue aside, it does depend upon how you look at it. There is no right or wrong answer there. It just depends on what you're doing. Are you upgrading or building an entire machine? Moving on to Ghost Recon Breakpoint, I'll take this opportunity to offer a thought. I fully understand that the majority of people watching these videos are not building $2,800 gaming PCs. That is not the bulk of the market. A huge number of you are spending $500, $700, $900, etc. You're in that price bracket. I understand. I probably should redo this whole video, but use lower end stuff like compare a $200 versus $300 versus $400 card, and then also upgrade the CPUs with it. Let me know in the comment section below if you'd be interested in seeing that sort of comparison, because I do understand this is rarefied air. Better value for the money is in that $700 to $900 price point than certainly the $2,800, where you're paying a huge premium to be able to say, well, if not first, at least best. In this case, in Ghost Recon Breakpoint, we have a 21% performance difference between the $800 solution and the $1,600 solution in terms of average performance. Of course, with the better CPU, I'm not going to rehash the CPU. You guys have all heard that argument. With the better CPU, you have smoother, better gameplay, etc. But frankly, that i7 should really be a Ryzen 7 2700X, so we won't repeat that. That 2080 Ti, yeah, I'm just not finding a lot of value there in general. Moving on to Shadow of the Tomb Raider, there is a larger performance difference here than there is on many of the other games. Part of that is the hyperthreading on the i9. Part of that is the better graphics card. Yes, DLSS was turned on, but it was turned on both cards. Both of these are RTX cards, so it's 1440p high detail with DLSS turned on. And as you can see here, it is notably faster on the i9 and 2080 Ti versus the 2070 Super. How much faster? 31% faster. So it's not quite the 40% faster that would meet our $2,000 to $2,800 standard, but of course you should expect to pay a premium to have the best in the business. Notice the 1% low is a little bit better, but again, built-in benchmark, so don't fuss about that too much. It's mostly the average frame rates we're comparing here to see how much value you get out of spending this kind of money. Having said that, let's take a look at the Division 2. Are we going to see a bigger performance difference here than we did before? Yes, we are. Spoiler alert. In fact, I'm not even going to show you the whole benchmark because this video is long enough as it is. We have exactly a 38.679, basically a 39% performance difference between these two hardware combinations. That's nearly the 40% if we're going off the $2,000 to $2,800 standard, but it's still horrifically terrible if we're going off the standard of just what the parts cost alone. Again, that's your own preference, just as you see fit for your own circumstances. The i9 and the 2080 Ti are definitely nice, but boy, you're sure paying a premium to have the best. Do keep in mind sometime later in 2020, the best will get replaced with the RTX 30 series. And that's just a treadmill that just never seems to end, now does it?
Thank you all so much for watching those benchmarks. 2 gold stars for all of you who watched this entire video without fast forwarding. Well, pausing is okay, but without fast forwarding. I've turned the computer on inside just so you can get a glimpse inside and see the changed cooler. The cooler does not affect the performance. A Noctua NHD15 or a Be Quiet Dark Rock Pro 4 are both perfectly sufficient to cool any of these CPUs without a problem, even being overclocked to 5 gigahertz or doing a mild overclock on the Ryzen chips. They won't go to 5 gigahertz, but you can get 4.4 to 4.5 out of those using either of these 2 premium tower coolers. I just thought I would share that with you. Notice the 2080 Ti is gone. If you have not already bought one at this point, I said this at the beginning of the video, don't. It's at the end of its, not at the end of its life, it's near the end of its life, and it's still over $1,000. It has no more value at this point. If you have not bought one, skip it. Wait. Do whatever you got to do to wait, because frankly, the RTX 3080 is coming soon. I don't know exactly when. At this point, I'm kind of guessing maybe June, maybe July, but they are coming very soon. They're in testing now. I don't have one yet. They're not that soon. They're not going to be coming in 2 months, but they are coming very, very soon. And when the RTX 3080 comes out, it'll be faster than a 2080 Ti, and it'll be cheaper if my read of the market is anything to go by, which probably has a 50-50 chance of being correct. But I really think the valuation of those is going to tank. Here's what I recommend. If you're in March of 2020 right now, and you're ready to build. You're ready to build a computer right now, and you don't want to wait. You don't want to wait for the new Intel chips. You don't want to wait for Zen 3, which is supposed to be 4th quarter of this year, by the way. Those aren't coming this summer. I actually believe AMD announced 4th quarter of 2020 is when Zen 3 is coming. So if you want to wait for that, sure, but it's going to be the end of the year. It's going to be another 9, maybe 8 months before those come out. Probably October or November is when we'll see those. I would do a Ryzen 7 3700X with an RTX 2060 or 2060 Super, or I would do a Ryzen 9 3900X with maybe a 2070 Super, but that's the highest I would go. It'll lose some value, but it won't be crushed the way the $1,000 premium end cards will at this point. You're paying a bit more for a bit more performance. It just depends upon how much up the chain you're willing to go to get just a touch. There's not really actually a huge difference between these cards. I mean, it's a minor difference, all things considered. Ryzen 9, interestingly enough, is not faster on a frame rate or a per core per clock basis than the Ryzen 7. You're getting 50% more cores, and you're getting more on-chip cache, which is better for multitasking and future-proofing and a few other things. It's for serious buyers who are building serious machines, and certainly when the RTX 30 series comes out, it's the kind of CPU you'd pair with that, but who knows how close Zen 3 will be at that point. So now we're really getting into future discussions. In any case, Ryzen's awesome, and we'll have to see what Intel brings to the table when the 10 series launches here in a couple of months. Hyper-threading across the board, 10 cores. I have seen some leaked benchmarks.
that indicate that the new i9-10900K, which is the new 10-core 20-thread chip, is faster than the Ryzen 9 3900X in both single-core and multi-threaded applications, which is interesting because it's deficient by 2 cores, 10 cores versus 12, but the new i9 runs at up to 5.3 gigahertz, and if it will MCE auto boost to 5.3 on all the cores, the way the i9-9900K auto boost to 5 gigahertz on all the cores without any trouble. There's no fancy overclocking going on when I do these tests. I go into the BIOS, I turn on multi-core enhancement, I leave voltage at auto, I reboot, everything works great. There's no issues whatsoever. If the new i9-10900K does 10 cores and 20 threads at 5.3 gigahertz, it's going to be a beast. For who knows how much money and ridiculous power consumption, I'm sure. You'll have to get a separate electric circuit to your house to make it run. Okay, thank you all so much for watching this video. As always, like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you love it. Remember to subscribe to the channel with the big, huge red button directly below. Questions, comments, thoughts, feedback, suggestions, you know where that comment section is. Leave me your thoughts. What did you think of this different format of comparing a paired set of a CPU-GPU combination, well, not these, and the other CPU-GPU combination, and doing $800 as a bundled price package versus $1,600 as a bundled price package? Would you like me to circle around and do a comparison? Maybe not with the Ryzen 9. What about Ryzen 5 3600X versus Ryzen 7 3700X? And then maybe RTX 2060 versus 2060 Super or GTX 1660? Or let me know in the comment section which pairing you'd like to see in another one, if you would like to see one of these videos. Thank you so much for watching. I will see all of you next time.